Joining us now is former governor of the great state of New Jersey, is Christie. And we're going to talk to him about this 5G stuff. Before we do, we have to ask him about what his take is on Jim Clapper going on CNN today. And he's all upset because Bill Barr said, well, they were spying. Yeah, there's obviously spying on the campaign, but, he's not making any conclusions about whether the spying was justified or whether it was politically motivated. And Clapper went crazy today on CNN saying, you can't say spying. It makes me very uncomfortable. He was head of Director of National Intelligence. Christie joins us now. Gov, how are you? Good to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm great, Laura. You can't make it up, can you? I mean,
no.
This is the guy who was out there making all kinds of unfounded accusations of the president for 2 years regarding Russian collusion. And now he's uncomfortable that the Attorney General of the United States wants to make sure that the intelligence agencies are acting legally and appropriately when conducting counterintelligence investigations. I mean, you can't make it up. Bill Barr yesterday said something, in my view, that should be obvious to everybody who watched the last 2 years, that there are real questions that need to be answered regarding the conduct of Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok and the whole group as to why they did the things they did. And I thought Barr was very careful, as you said yesterday, saying, I've reached no conclusions, but I think that I'm curious about this. I have some concerns, and I'd like to have those concerns answered.
Yeah, well,
so,
the interesting thing,
Jim Clapper, I'd be nervous.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't look too good. Missing a little color in his cheeks after that. But it looks like that Barr is going all the way back to June of 2016, which is key because that's when they really said, uh-oh, this guy's going to be the nominee of the party. And this poor old Carter Page, I'm like, Carter Page couldn't spy his way out of a paper bag. I mean, God bless him, but Carter Page had like 4 FISA warrants on him, and the guy's like, I mean, he's a bit of a quirky dude, but because he went to a conference in Russia, suddenly he's running the FSB. Yeah, crazy.
It's really amazing, and having been involved in the campaign, the idea that those fellas, whether it was Carter Page or Papadopoulos, were national security risks. I think if you would have spent a little time at the campaign and seen them nowhere near anybody who mattered, you would have known that these guys were, to be kind, wannabes, and they were not key players in the campaign. And, I think that what Bill Barr is going to do is do what Bill Barr was sent there to do, which was to make sure that the Justice Department is conducting itself appropriately every day without regard to politics, and to make sure that, our laws are being followed. And, he's a guy who I think has the ability and the credibility to do it. So it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Now, and I think, again, this idea that it is now okay to demonize, as they are with Bill Barr, demonize someone who just came into the position, basically. He was the former attorney general. He was the CEO of one of the most important telecom companies in the world. And as far as I can tell, pretty much everyone respects his intellect and his ethics. I don't think they've all ever been called into question. And suddenly you have Joe Scarborough and people saying his reputation will be forever destroyed because he had a connection with this administration and now is in the cabinet. Forever destroyed. And Kirstjen Nielsen should never work again. That's the other thing they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, listen, these people are frantic now, as you know, because for 2 years they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. And not only didn't it drop, the other shoe didn't even exist. And I think that they're desperate now, or to impugn the reputation of anybody who now says because of this, some legitimate questions need to be asked. Before, during the Mueller investigation, all I heard these people say was that, well, let's just let the facts come out. Let's just let Bob Mueller be able to investigate. Let's not him be impeded in any way. Yet they want to not only impede the Attorney General, they want to completely prevent the Attorney General from even asking these questions. And the great thing about Bill Barr is He doesn't need this job. He doesn't need their approval. And he's going to do what he thinks is right, and he will walk away with a sterling reputation as one of the country's great lawyers.
This was a moment, I believe it was yesterday, in this hearing on Capitol Hill when he was questioned. It was Lindsey Graham, I believe, doing the questioning. Let's listen.
Would it be odd that the candidate was never really briefed by the Department of Justice that your campaign may be targeted by a foreign entity?
That is one of the questions I have. I feel normally the campaign would have been advised of this.
Okay. And can you think of a good reason right now why they wouldn't have been?
I'm interested in getting that answer. They had two former U.S. attorneys in Christie and Rudy Giuliani involved in the campaign, and I don't understand why the campaign was not advised.
So that's, I don't know if you had heard that your name came up yesterday.
I did hear that my name came up yesterday, but I had not yet heard the context. So thank you for
You're welcome. We're always looking out for you, Gov.
I know you are. And by the way, absolutely appropriately mentioned by the Attorney General. I mean, not only, as you know, was I involved in the campaign where I was the chairman of the transition, and by the way, I don't think I've ever said this publicly before, had interaction with DNI Clapper. I was the guy he interacted with to set up the then candidate Trump's intelligence briefings. Oh. So it's not as if we didn't have contact with each other. Not like he didn't know how to get in touch with me. If there was something, and I was the person that the president brought into the intelligence briefings. So if there was something of a counterintelligence nature that needed to be discussed with the candidate, he certainly could have sat with me, given my background, my clearance, and my experience in these matters. And I could have sat with DNI Clapper and, by the way, Director Comey, who I also worked with when I was U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, and he was the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. These folks know me. They knew me well. They worked with me. We had a good relationship back when we were in the Bush 43 administration. And I thought I think the Attorney General made a completely appropriate comment. Even if they didn't know Rudy and hadn't worked with him, they worked with me. And they should have sat down with me and explained this to me and said, would you be willing to sit with us to explain this to the candidate? And no one ever did.
Well, again, which leads any, I think, reasonable person. Take Trump out of it. Say it's any individual running for president. Just say it's not Trump for a moment. That is extremely concerning. So you were setting up these customary, and they're customary after you. That usually happens after the convention, correct, Governor? That the candidate would get
but he was the nominee apparent. There were no other people in the race, so they wanted to start the briefing sooner, and so did we, so that the candidate could be fully briefed on the nation's secrets.
Mm-hmm. So if you were concerned
but not
that
this one, Laura,
right,
but not this one.
So if they were concerned that Russia could in fact change the outcome of the election, or was trying to get close, I mean, I would presume that the FBI or the intel agencies would want to prevent that from happening, which would mean they know you, they know your integrity, they know your background. They would say, look, we're really worried about something, and we need to bring you in to bring you to the circle of information so we make sure the integrity of this election is protected. I mean,
that's right. But by the way, Laura, wouldn't it make sense if you had concerns enough about Carter Page that you got a FISA warrant on him? If you had concerns enough about George Papadopoulos that you were surveilling him, that you would tell the candidate, by the way,
you don't want this guy.
Information to do these things. Do you still want them to be part of the campaign? Do you still want them to be employed here as a volunteer or in a paid position? I mean, if you're Donald Trump, it seems to me that if there were any whiff of that, you'd want to get those people out of your campaign.
I mean, all of this is so, I mean, to me, it seems so obvious now. But when you're in the middle of it, when you were sitting down with these people and getting the candidate ready, the nominee ready, I mean, did you think in your wildest dreams that something like this could be going on?
No. I mean, not in my wildest dreams, and especially because we were having regular interaction with the leaders of the intelligence community and some very well-qualified, well-informed agents who were advising the nominee about the status of, U.S. threats to the U.S. from around the world, to prepare him in case he was elected. So those were the perfect atmospheres where they could have taken me aside and said, listen, you're a former U.S. attorney, you have top secret clearance. We need to talk to you about these things and get your advice on how to approach the candidate. Get your help on approaching the candidate to address these sensitive issues since you have a relationship with them. Instead, they did none of that. And I think, listen, we don't know why and what the answers are. And I thought the Attorney General was very careful there to say, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm interested to find out. And shouldn't that be what we want from our Attorney General, is for him to find out answers to these questions without reaching conclusions beforehand? That would be a refreshing change from where we've been.
We're talking to Governor Christie here in the Laura Ingraham podcast. Here's also where candidates for the presidency are today. These are Democrats today, even after the synopsis of Mueller was released, no collusion, obstruction. Obviously, they spent 2 years trying to find obstruction. They couldn't find any intent to obstruct an investigation. But this is Eric Swalwell today.
Believe that President Trump still is an agent of Russia. What do you mean by that?
He acts on their behalf. He puts their interests too often ahead of our own interests. And that, again, that affects opportunity at home. If we become more like Russia, where it's a top floor economy and only the fat cats are able to benefit and all of us just toil away and get crumbs.
Do you think he's taking orders from Vladimir Putin? When you say agent, what do you mean by that?
Well, if he wasn't taking orders, he wouldn't take the interpreter's notes. If he wasn't taking orders, he would release the report that he said he's 100% exonerated with.
Terrifying that someone of this intellect is
it's
running.
unbelievable, Laura. This guy is a joke, and he shouldn't be taken seriously by anybody for 5 minutes. But the fact that they're giving this guy airtime and have been giving him airtime has been a constant irritant to me every time I've seen him on. To call the President of the United States an agent of Russia after the Mueller report's been released, to call the President, say that the President of the United States is taking orders from Vladimir Putin, is just insulting and ridiculous. And this guy needs to be dismissed in the way that, people who have that level of integrity, which is zero, should be dismissed.
Yeah, you have, again, I looked at Bill Barr. He reminds me a lot of you, Governor, as well. It's like you and Justice Scalia and Bill Barr have – God bless. I miss Justice Scalia so much. But it's the way you react to questions. I keep thinking to myself, I really want a subliminal scroll at the bottom of the screen.
I was thinking the same thing, Laura, yesterday watching the Attorney General listen to these ridiculous pre-canned questions that don't in any respect relate to the answers he's already given. And him, I think he's thinking to himself, what am I doing here? Why did I take this job?
I left retirement. I left a cushy retirement. I got grandkids. I've already done this stuff, and I'm looking across the table at these characters, one after the other, making the most ridiculous comments. And then people like Joe Scarborough. I got to play this Scarborough. This is Scarborough talking about Bill Barr and what Bill Barr is today. Let's listen.
Donald Trump wanted his Roy Cohn. He got his Roy Cohn. Except you can tell Barr doesn't really feel it like Roy Cohn did. He makes an outrageous claim that Roy Cohn would make. The spying claim. You can almost see in his mind Barr going, okay, how do I answer this question so Trump doesn't tweet at me, so I keep my job, but still not make a jackass of myself for life?
That's tough.
That's tough.
Mika's input is always quite edifying.
Yeah, well, listen, I can tell you one thing for sure, knowing Bill Barr a bit. He's not worried about keeping his job. He didn't seek this job. It sought him. And I think he would be perfectly content if he at any time thought that his integrity was being compromised by anything anyone asked him to do, to resign and to go back to the world of private practice where he was enormously successful and respected. I think these conclusions that they're drawing, typically on MSNBC, are just wishful thinking. In the end, I think what we're going to see is an attorney general who is going to conduct a review of this with integrity, and he's going to come out with whatever the correct answers are, if there are answers to be given. And if they're not, you know what? He won't even address it again anymore. That's the way these things are done in the Justice Department. And one of the things I loved yesterday that he continued to say over and over again is, we will do this the way these matters are typically handled in the Justice Department. And, he wants to restore the Justice Department after what was a very difficult time under the former Attorney General to an organization that's respected because it makes sure justice is done every day. That's what the job of the department is, and I have great confidence in the Attorney General is going to do that.
Well, I completely concur. I mean, the probably best thing that ever happened to him is if he got fired from the job right now. I mean, honestly. I mean, he'd be like, okay, good, go back to Florida, whatever. Go back to
exactly
Northern
right.
Virginia.
Go back to grandkids and making significantly more money than he's making as the Attorney General of the United States.
Yeah, I think he's just fine. I know you've been writing and thinking a lot about this 5G debate in the United States, and a lot of our listeners might not understand what 5G is, so you can talk about that. But there's question of the mobile, Sprint and T-Mobile merger, and that involves the 5G concerns and so forth. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, was questioned on Capitol Hill about this very issue. Let's listen.
How does the U.S. plan to mitigate the risk of working with countries that continue to deploy Huawei technology in their 5G infrastructure?
So while it's fairly technical, I'll summarize. Our security leaders don't believe there's a technical mitigation technique that's available today. That is, we may solve the riddle, but the risks of having equipment, network systems co-located with Huawei systems, other Chinese systems, is a very, very difficult technical problem. So our solution to mitigating that risk will be not to co-locate or not to share American information with countries that choose to put this technology in their systems, knowing that the risk that it will wander to China's government is too great. And so America will have to choose another method. We won't be able to share information or participate along with some of our important national security partners if they choose to go down this path of installing this technology.
Your thoughts on this and why this Chinese company, Huawei, the administration believes is a potential gateway into compromising U.S. intelligence and U.S. domination of major technological companies and interests?
Well, as you know, Laura, 5G is the next generation of our capability to use the internet, to download information, to communicate with each other at really speeds that we've never seen before, and will allow all of us with the phones that we're using in our everyday life to be able to communicate and learn in ways that are unimaginable right now. And the real question here is, what's the best way to do it? Now, we won the 4G fight around the world for being the people who developed that technology best because we used our private sector system to develop that in conjunction with the government ensuring our national security. And I think that's exactly what the Secretary of State is implying there, that in the end, we don't want a government solution to this. Our solution for the security perspective is that we just won't co-locate with people who want to use that Chinese technology. But to show you right now from a private sector perspective how far ahead we are of China, Laura, we have 20 sites that are now deployed for 5G by our private sector companies in the United States. China has 1. And so we are way ahead of them. And what we need to do is to empower the private sector, get obstacles out of the way, as the president's been doing with getting rid of regulatory requirements, allow the FCC to do what the chairman of the FCC wants to do, which is get more barriers out of the way to let the private sector develop 5G, do it with American technology, and to warn all of our allies that if you're going to use Chinese technology, you're not going to get the benefit of the best technology in the world, which is American private sector technology.
So you would then take the pro-Huawei argument or the anti-Huawei argument?
anti. I mean, we do not want to be working with the Chinese on this. It makes no sense to do that. But we don't need to have a government control of this to do it. We can allow our government to work in conjunction with the private sector in developing this with appropriate national security safeguards to keep us away from working with companies like Huawei and allowing the Chinese to have access to our information and our technology.
On February 20th, the CEO of Huawei asserted on CBS This Morning that, quote, "We absolutely never install backdoors into our systems. Even if we were required by Chinese law, we would firmly reject that." Who believes that? I mean, I don't believe any of that. Come on.
No one believes any of it. And in fact, as you know, there is law after law on the books in China which requires citizens to cooperate with the government in obtaining intelligence on foreign countries and in protecting Chinese intelligence from foreign intervention. And these are laws that are on the books that require everyday citizens to participate in this and do it. So the idea that the CEO of Huawei would say that they would not cooperate with the laws that are established already in China that require them to do so is laughable.
He'd find himself in a re-education camp real soon. What do you mean you're not going to help the state? You're not going to stay. Okay, that's you're going to be with those poor Muslims, those 800,000 Muslims being re-educated as well. So, Governor, tell us what you're up to now. What are you? Are you back at ABC? What are you doing?
We are. I'm back at ABC, still doing commentary there. I'll be on the Sunday show this week. I'm so involved in serving on a number of boards of directors, doing some paid public speaking, and now also opened up my own consulting firm and law firm where I'm working on providing strategic advice to folks on a lot of the issues that we even talked about today. And so I'm enjoying the private sector, Laura. It's been 16 years that I was U.S. attorney and governor. And I've got 2 more kids to put through school. So Mary Pat and I are both enjoying the fact that we're going to be able to give them the same opportunity we gave the 2 older siblings, which is to go to college and not worry about being in debt when they leave.
Are all of them in college now? I mean, I know you have graduates, but any?
No, we got 2 graduates, and we've got one who's a senior in high school now, Patrick, who will be heading to Providence College next year.
Nice.
And so he's heading up there and continuing our tradition in our family of Catholic education.
Providence is a great school.
Graduated from Notre Dame, and our daughter Bridget is a sophomore at the Villa Maria Academy in Morristown, New Jersey, and is in the midst of her serious lacrosse season. So those are the 2 we have left, and the 2 older ones are thankfully successfully launched and both living in New York City and working, and as Mary Pat and I say, pretty much off the payroll.
Oh, isn't it wild? Isn't it just so weird? Raymond is with us, and Raymond's son's at Notre Dame, and his other 2 kids are in their teens, and I say this, so I get very emotional. Like, I'm giving away one of those little children's tables from Pottery Barn with the little chairs because my kids don't need them, and they're 10, 8, and 13, and going on the next year now in a couple months, and I looked at it in the garage, and I literally started weeping. I'm like, it just goes by so fast. I know it's so cliche, but it really is true.
It is true, and Mary Pat and I are now 2 years away from being empty nesters.
Oh my
God.
It's
extraordinary to me how quickly the lives of our 4 children have gone by, and how proud we are of them. I mean, a lot of their lives they grew up in the public spotlight, and they just were so blessed, Laura, that they adjusted to that well, and they're successful, healthy, smart, and faithful children, and we're just incredibly blessed. But we do feel like, oh my gosh, we got to figure out. We'll be married 35 years when Bridget leaves.
Good for you.
And we'll have to decide whether we still like each other. Laura.
I was going to say that. She puts up with you. This is why I've always loved Mary Pat. She puts up with you, okay? You're as easy to deal with as I am, which is not easy to deal with, okay? That's why I'm single.
Listen, the fact that she puts up with the way I argue, and
oh my God,
and, because the two of us are trained arguers, and the fact that she's put up with that for 3 years now, I'm incredibly lucky. I told her though, at this point, I'm like a barnacle on her ship. There's no way she's getting rid of me, no matter what. So I'm a lucky guy.
Well, give her our very best and your entire family, and it's just so great to talk to you. We miss talking to you and seeing you. And if you come to D.C. in the area, will you give us a call so we can break bread or something? Of course,
we got to get together, absolutely. And great luck on the podcast. I'm a listener, and it's really it's great. It's great to have you available on this format now, and I'm happy to participate whenever you need me.
Fantastic. Love having you on. Governor Chris Christie here on the Laura Ingraham podcast.